Yes, it's ready now.
Okay. Uh, you have to. Okay. For all people who are joining new, all these lectures are live streamed on YouTube, and you can pick up the link from your WhatsApp group. Okay. Okay, let's start. So today we are going to be doing what is called multiculturalism. In fact, all these topics would fall under the broad ambit of sociology. And that's what makes the whole migration and diaspora study very interesting because there are a lot of fields that we touch in this. I minimize this. Okay. To
Chawla,
reiterate, sorry.
this migration and diaspora theory and methodology, that course title, like,
Oh,
uh,
okay. Okay. That needed to be changed, but I put the MDI 006 Indian Diaspora Sociocultural. Actually, I should have changed this. Sorry. This was a continuation of PPTs which happened. So a lot of times, the copy paste, there are some slips which happens. So this is MDI 006 Indian Diaspora Social Cultural Facets. And again, to reiterate, there are such certain aspects that I'll keep repeating every class. The way the class functions, you can stop me at any moment of time to add something that which could be of value to the other members of the class. You can stop me at any moment of time to ask a question. I'll try and answer each question to the best of my ability. There are certain things, if we do not know, we can always check and come back. Besides that, as I said repetitively, and again I will say, academics and scholarly pursuits are more like perspectives. We are not looking at right and wrong. We are not looking at what is correct, incorrect. These are perspectives. Inevitably, if I quote a definition, I will give the person who has given the definition because in every human being is subjective and everybody is ideological or otherwise aligned. We will take everything as what they say or what has been said, and you will have to figure out what works and what does not work. In terms of answering, you can take the essence and answer your assignments or your end term examination. In fact, multiculturalism is a very interesting subject and a very contentious subject because think about it. If we look at India as historically, India was always multicultural. In fact, one of the reasons why we are what we are is because India was a place where so many races, so many cultures would come and are were able to demonstrate their culture. For example, we heard from Aisha last time how she's a Memon, and they have a Sindhi culture, and they came from the undivided India, what is now Pakistan. But there are so many. So there are Siddhis, there are who came from Africa. There are Mongols. There are Andaman has a different set of, and all these communities, societies, people have different culture. And if I was just looking at the fact that one of the key concepts that we use so often in India, Vasudev Kutumbakam, which came from the Vedic period, also means world is a family. So we are actually a case study of multiculturalism, but multiculturalism as a scholarly pursuit or a scholarly discipline came in much later, and obviously it originated in the West. Also, because of the fact we look at the fact that when colonization happened and all these people, all the Europeans reached out throughout the world, And post World War II, post colonization, when people from the South, global South, started coming into North, these guys could not know how to handle it. And in fact, we will see during the presentation how this multiculturalism as a discipline was conceptualized. So quickly go through the objectives. The objectives are meaning and concept of multiculturalism, characteristics, emergence, as an accommodative philosophy, analyze the role of multiculturalism in Indian diaspora, importance of multicultural. And today, the whole concept or the whole definitions of how we define diaspora itself is shifting, it's changing. On top of that, transnationalism is a big concept with the concept of globalization. These are some of these terms that we have been using for the last so many units. So a lot of new people who have joined the class now uh, cannot see the slides. Hang on. Sorry. Thank you for telling me. Let me stop sharing. Let me share back. Can you see the slide now?
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
same slide, sir. Same slide. First
Okay,
slide.
no. First slide. Now I have moved the slide. Can you see the
Second
movement?
slide.
Can you see the movement?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So as I was saying, the whole concept of diaspora in terms of definitions, what was classically defined as diaspora itself is changing. On top of that, there is the new concept of transnationalism, where, see, initially when migration used to happen, people used to go from one place to another place with the possibility of coming back almost zero because the modes of transport were very slow. The communication was just non-existent. But today, with real-time communication, with FaceTime, with WhatsApp, with Signal, Telegram as messaging app, with YouTube, use 360 degrees view, one is constantly connected back into the into the home nation from the host nation. And inevitably, the information flies back and forth from host to home, home to host, influencing everybody in the picture. So the whole concept, how things have moved, is marked different than what initially the diaspora studies was conceptualized. In fact, the whole diaspora studies was conceptualized around the Jewish diaspora. Then subsequently, people realized that there is much more to diaspora than just the Jewish diaspora. Then, of course, there was a feminization of migration, which happened earlier. Women only used to migrate, as wives. Subsequently, now there are enough women who migrate because of jobs and so on and so forth. And obviously, also what we talked in the last couple of units, people do not travel as a body. People travel as a culture. People travel as an identity. In fact, in the whole diaspora study, another very important concept is the concept of identity. How we look at ourselves, how each one of us looks at ourselves, what we explained, and each one of us works with multiple identities. The identities are very fluid. We keep moving without identity, moving within identities. We can assume multiple identities at the same time. And obviously, people and communities and groups of people look at or take that identity, which becomes profitable. Profitable is more of a financial term, which gives them some amount of gratification. So we keep moving with that identity, take those identities which gratify us, and that's how things move. So let's start with multiculturalism is a theoretical framework, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-religious, and multilingual societies. And that's where I brought India first. Think about the fact that in India, we never needed to study this. No two people or no two neighbors are identical in terms of culture in any cosmopolitan city, except possibly the rural sector where there is quite homogeneity in terms of people, in terms of the location where they stay. Once you come into an urban or a metropolitan area, you will see there is a lot of multiculturalism which is practiced and happens. So Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary defines it as a practice of giving importance to all cultures in society. And that's where the comparison with India becomes a very interesting thing, because we never thought a second time about a different culture. We have all kinds of cultures around us. In fact, I always give the example of the state which I stay in. I stay in a state known as Haryana. Haryana is a very small state. If I was to travel from one end of Haryana to another end of the Haryana, it's about 250 to 300 kilometers, about 5 hours of journey. But from South Haryana to any place in Haryana, you can see, the change of language, the change of clothes, the change of food. There is a complete different culture in every part of Haryana. So much so that in various parts of Haryana, you can't even understand the dialect that they speak. Terence Turner, in his book Anthropology and Multiculturalism, points to the fact that is one's manifestation of postmodernist reaction to the delegitimization of state and erosion of hegemony of the dominant culture. So inevitably, this essentially boils down to the fact that, irrespective of the fact that the whole Western world colonized the rest of the world, it was that once people from the rest of the world started landing up in the Western world, they did not know how to define it, how to make sense of it. Today, also, if you see, the rest of the Western world seems to be at odds with the rest of the world. There is a debate in the Western world about immigration, and about immigrants, and how immigration and immigrant is bad for their countries, forgetting the fact historically they have colonized the rest of the world. Now, so this is how they wanted to make sense of the various cultures. Tariq Mohammed, in his book Multiculturalism 2007, defines as a mode of integration that cannot be juxtaposed with other modes, such as assimilation and adaptation. Again, these are some things that we talked about in earlier units. Once you, as a person who has a particular culture goes to another place which has another culture, you can either assimilate your culture into them or adapt your culture. More often than not, and we see that in India also, for example, a lot of people who move from rural areas to urban areas try to be urbanized and pick up the urbanized culture, forgetting the fact that their culture is there. For example, a very interesting part of the rural culture was that waste from kitchen was not thrown out in terms of garbage. Typically, waste was put in rural India. It's called, for example, in Haryana, it's called tudi, which is made into, biocompost. It's given to the animals, especially cows and buffaloes. Now, I see a lot of people in urban India, let's say, for example, in Gurgaon, who are throwing their kitchen waste out for the animals to eat. Now, this is a very rural culture which has been, coming into the urban setup. Whether it's right or wrong is not the point. The point is it was a rural culture which is now being exhibited in the urban culture. There are multiple issues to it, but that's besides the point. So this multiculturalism is based on a core democratic value of liberty, equality, and fraternity. That's what the book talks about. He claims that each mode of integration has some demerits, but multiculturalism as a whole is a response to shortcomings necessary to any strategy where groups are needed to integrate for a larger benefit. More often than not, also understand the fact when people will migrate, and migration has been a constant story of humankind. Migration is constantly happen. In fact, it is increasing because of various reasons. People are migrating, carrying their culture, and now you are going to another place which has another culture. So inevitably, either there is going to be a conflict, or there is going to be a superiority, inferiority kind of a thing where my culture is better than your culture. But who says that? But the third aspect is, if we are able to give respect to each culture, saying that each culture is good enough for the persons practicing the culture, you have much more peace and tranquility rather than conflicts. Emergence of multiculturalism can be traced back to mid-18th century. So now you'll see what I was talking about. This was typically happening as migration was happening, as Europeans were moving out to colonize and people were coming back into those countries. The German critics developed the notion of differences and diversity of culture, favored the harmonious existence of cultural diversity. Historians, including Harder and Ranke, supported the idea of cultural diversity in order to enlighten the idea of progress. So, this was a response to migration. They argue that human society is constituted by distinct and heterogeneous culture. Each culture has its own value, tradition, norm. Each culture is complete in itself, emerged as a movement first in Canada and Australia, and then in USA, UK, and Germany. Wider use in 80s in the form of public school curriculum. So America had to teach their children about multiculturalism, while in India, we grew up to understand multiculturalism because we saw it all around us. We did not have to teach anybody. In America's post-Civil War and post-Harlem resistance, and America had another issue to grapple with, especially with the slaves, the black slaves. So America got all these black slaves, which were, got into slavery by the Europeans, pushed into America to do work in their farms and their homes. And then there was this movement for independence of the slaves. There was the American Civil War. Now you had, and more often than not, the predominant discourse was the white culture, the white supremacy. And now these blacks were demanding equal rights. The American Constitution gave everybody equal rights. Now, how to understand this? That there is a different culture. So even if you see, the Europeans brought the concept of cultural superiority, talking about natives with their poor culture, inevitably this was an ideological war. The new models of integration, assimilation, and adaptation favors the emergence of multicultural society in America. Immigrants, irrespective of the race, ethnic, cultural, and religious faith, settle with new vision and new commitment. And now, if you do not do that, more often than not, the scholars and the thinkers thought that if we do not do that and let one culture hegemonize the other culture, it will lead to conflict. And we will see why. We will see why as we go along. In the postmodern world, multicultural is seen as a medium to represent race, ethnicity, class, gender, sexuality. In the last couple of classes, we talked about ethnicity, we talked about religion, we talked about caste. 3 different identities, and all of them join to form a culture. In this globalized world, migration changes the culture continuously. We construct this so large multicultural. And today, by far, each country is multicultural, if you see. And if the country or the state is not able to manage or govern those cultures, we see that there is a conflict which comes in. The identity conflict, the cultural conflict. People do not migrate alone, they bring their cultures along, as we talked about. And there is a hybrid culture which comes in, can be seen as a rational system that allows immigrants to express their view with the host society. So once that concept of multicultural as a theory or as a framework was brought in, typically that allowed people to express themselves and said, this is my culture, and that culture is my identity, and I am comfortable with this identity, and I will fit in the larger national identity with my smaller cultural identity. And that should be okay with you, with your cultural identity, and both of us having the common national identity. Has been used in 2 broad ways, descriptive and normative. Descriptive term, multicultural, refers to cultural diversity, and normative term, it suggests ideologies that endorse the diversity. The Indian ideology has always supported multiculturalism. We have always, as a country, as a state, as a culture, welcomed everybody who came to this country. And each person or each component of the society which came into this country brought in their cultures and continued with their cultures. In fact, that's what makes the Indian experiment unique, is because everybody carried on with their culture, exhibited their cultures, and nobody was inferior or superior. The first form of multicultural refers to the presence of diverse culture, which is basically the descriptive term, and the normative second form tells how to maintain that cultural diversity, minority identity, how to improve. So India practiced both descriptive as well as normative. So Rajiv Bhargav and the multicultural framework, issue of normative and descriptive multicultural can be put into broader conflict. Now, when you have multiple cultures, which culture is better than the other? More often than not, both are identical in a different way. But then we also understand there is politics at play. There is a politics of identity, and then one culture tries to push the other culture down. For example, a basic thing, vegetarianism versus non-vegetarianism. Now, there are arguments for vegetarianism, there are arguments for non-vegetarianism, there are arguments against both. Problem starts happening when one set of people with one set of culture starts pushing their culture on top of the other culture. Otherwise, everything is fine. The conflict happens once there is this hegemony type. The first moment of conflict, the concept of a particular as hierarchy, which means a particular community is dominant over other communities. As soon as that starts happening, there is a conflict which starts developing. Cultural differences are maintained through the relationship of superior and subordinate. So during the colonized era, during the colonial period, the Britishers very clearly brought out this normative narrative that their culture was better than the Indian culture. And that was something which got internalized among a lot of Indians, that inferiority complex. In fact, today also you see a lot of people tend to, take care of that inferiority complex by trying and comparing yourself with the British, with the Westerners. We inevitably, you get into this, this cultural difference through a relationship of superior and subordinate. Second moment of conflict, universalistic equality, in which one only way to maintain equality is to deny the significance. So now we are saying that there are multiple cultures. Each culture is identical or equal. But do we allow the cultures to have their own cultural construct, or do we give priority or emphasis to the individual? Because in a democratic, secular state, a modern state, individuals should have a value which should be far higher than anything else. People are equal because their role in the cultural community is not considered important. Rather, their individual status and their membership is a considered significant. So if an individual is feeling a sense of betrayal or a sense of not being given justice because of a part of a culture, then the individual is given a preference. That's why the whole concept of fundamental rights, directive principles, blah, blah, blah. And there is a law where the individual, in case feels that he is not being given justice, can take in the law. And yet the Indian state was trying and be equidistant from various cultures. It is a very difficult thing to manage. Should the cultural component be given emphasis over an individual, or the individual should be given emphasis over the cultural construct? One has to kind of talk this out and decide. There is nothing, again, right or wrong. So, for example, in Haryana, there are something called Khap Panchayats. Khap Panchayats are cultural construct of a Haryanvi society where the Khap delivers verdicts. So, is the Khap verdict over the verdict of a Supreme Court or a High Court, or any person who has been aggrieved by the Khap Panchayat can go into the High Court or Supreme Court? the way the Indian state is functioned is the fact that they allow the culture at the same time. The emphasis or the priority of the state is much higher than the cultural construct or the cultural community. The third moment or in this conflict is a particularized equality. Differences among people, but equal membership in a particular cultural group is important. Relationship about different cultural communities. So more often than not, each cultural group is equal. There is no, there is no high hierarchy in terms of cultural group, and that allows the society to function seamlessly. Each and every member of a cultural community should have an independent recognition within society. So again, these are multiple identities which are working separately. So individual has his or her own identity. There is an identity which is a part of the cultural group. There could be a sub-identity which could be a part of a religious group. The religion is a part of culture. There is a separate identity in terms of the nation. There could be a separate identity in part of a subgroup. So, for example, the Hindu religion can be subdivided into Shaivites, Vaishnavites, or divided into castes. Islam or Muslim community can be divided into Memons, Shia, Sunnis, the Sikh community, the Christian community. Every community can have multiple divisions in terms of identity. Termed at egalitarian multiculturalism, because the class cannot be the basis of recognition, but only culture and a way of life. Emergence of multiculturalism as an accommodative philosophy. Freedom of expression and right to practice one's own culture along with the host culture. Now, so basically all this thing about multiculturalism as a subject or as a discipline came because of migration, because people were migrating, people were carrying their cultures together, and scholars and academicians try to reason out as to how do we not have tensions in the society and yet allow these people to prosper as an accommodative philosophy, because it deals with society's distinct policies, conflicting views, developing a healthy democratic tradition and popular imagine of the culture. And because if you allow these cultural conflicts to happen, then inevitably they will start impinging on the national identity. So if you see a direct example, what is happening in Manipur, the cultural identities are now at conflict with each other, affecting the state identity and the national identity, because inevitably they will dwell onto each other. Multicultural society ensures equality to the people of all cultures, language, races, religions, and adheres the law for integration, assimilation, and adoption. Concept of has become a controversial issue as well as has been criticized. And like any academic subject, there are controversies to it. And like any academic subject, see, the interesting part of scholarly and academic pursuits is a certain amount of controversy and to be criticized, because that is how new areas get developed. For example, when diaspora definitions were criticized, that all diaspora definitions inevitably mirror the Jewish diaspora, then scholars said, no, there are other diasporas. Let's look at the other diasporas also. Everything is not just the Jewish diaspora. There are other ways this diaspora formations have happened. The initial assimilation efforts of diverse culture within a society did not work out. Impossible to merge culturally different immigrants into the Western culture. And again, there were different models which were working. Everybody wanted, for example, America wanted all cultures to assimilate into the American culture, which was problematic, because when a migrant reaches America, a distant land, and you want that migrant to not only, he or she is in a new place, you are wanting that migrant or immigrant to leave the culture and pick up American culture. So not only it's a new place, it's a new language, it's a new culture. Obviously, the immigrant feels not at home. and leads to conflict in society, leads to tensions in society, leads to conflicts. Process of integration has also failed. Host society is also remember the host society also keeps on changing. Nothing is stationary. Things are changing continuously. The scholars of multiculturalism have been focusing on the question of identity in recent time. Inevitably, identity is a very strong factor. If you're not careful, then inevitably identity politics come into the picture, which leads to conflict. Multicultural society, individuals have multiple identity, which we have talked about. Then there is this national identity that is based on citizenship. So inevitably, the Indian migrant who goes to America starts with the national identity of being an Indian. Once more and more groups get formed, then the Indian identity gets subdivided into, let's say, the Telugu identity, the Tamil identity, the Punjabi identity, which then further gets subdivided into the Hindu identity, the Muslim identity, the Sikh identity, which can also be subdivided based on from this particular region, from this particular region. And all these things keep on breaking up. Questions of identity, Rajiv Bhargav in Multicultural Famous, discourse of assumes that the identity of an individual resembles to a particular culture, and such cultures as a whole resemble boundaries, which we know do not happen. Therefore, differences in identity is supposed to relate to difference in culture. So more often than not, unless you are able to manage the various cultural identities with the national identity, inevitably there will be a conflict. And the second thing which happens is, if you notice, each culture, each religion is actually exclusionary. If you are a part of one religion or if you are a part of one culture, then you cannot be a part of any other culture or any other religion. In fact, the whole identity question works on exclusion. The basic concept of multicultural weakens the foundation of a society by providing equal rights to oppressive cultures, decomposes the value of liberal multiculturalism democracy, the need to maintain differences and support the idea of bringing these differences into the political domain. And if you are not able to get all these into the political domain, you again have a problem. Because if you are getting different cultures to exist simultaneously, but they are not a part of the political process, then more often than not, these people start feeling estranged, which then brings tensions in the society. Roderick's, and then there is a relationship between state and identity. In the case for multiculturalism, emphasizes multiculturalism relocates the task of a state in a basic way. State itself would like to push an identity on its citizens, the citizenship identity, the national identity. But we know the fact that irrespective of the national identity, there are sub-identities. Is opposed to the state-sponsor identities and would undermine the authentic constitution of the self as it to a race of identities. So there are multiple identities. So a person might be let's say a Gujarati, a person might be a Gujarati Indian, and yet the Gujarati Indian might not be enough of an identity. They might be a religious identity or a specific regional identity or a professional identity which might oversee all these identities and will keep moving. Invitation. Multiculturalism is an invitation to dialogue, large cultural and community bound social existence. Our knowledge and understanding remains necessarily limited. Model of in a multicultural state, there will always be the existence of multiple identities in public sphere, puts its language, religion, culture, and state. So look at India. The first Indian state which was reconstituted was based on language, the Telugu state of Andhra Pradesh. Subsequently, the existence of identities under the language came to play, and now the Andhra state has been divided into Telangana and Andhra Pradesh based on the identity of development and non-development. Again, the development and non-development was because of multiple castes, some of them dominant in Andhra, which were not allowing others to exploit the various processes at play in a democratic India. So the state got divided. Now there are two states speaking Telugu.
Sir, this division of Telangana and Andhra,
Yeah.
what was the basis of division? It was, of course, not language, because language is same, and the religion
Correct.
is also not very important. So
Right.
what was the main reason?
So is there anybody from Andhra out here to answer this question? Ranjit, would you like to answer this question if you are there? We have among us a person from Andhra who also is into politics. But one of the reason was the fact that the Telangana, what is today the Telangana state or the Telangana region, felt itself not getting the resources which the rest of the Andhra Pradesh was getting. And again, it had to do with dominant caste and subordinate caste. So there are multiple obviously no state is devoid of caste. So there are multiple castes. There are some predominant castes, there are not some predominant castes. How this works out was basically because Telangana felt that that part of the region was not getting adequate resources, and the caste composition or the identity politics of that area felt that they were not getting the requisite spoils of the democratic process, or they were not getting enough development, and they wanted to split with the other part of the Manish.
Yeah, so I will sum up. It is the basis of division is the division of resources followed by caste.
Manish, it could be much more than that. It could be much more than that. If you were to, now that you have told me, let me have a look as to how. See, remember also, everybody needs to understand in any sociological or other processes, there is never a deterministic process. Because as soon as you say there is only one or two factors, then we are trying to put the emphasis of those two factors, but there are always multiple factors at play. They could also
now this remind me of the Northern Ireland, you know.
Which Northern Ireland?
This Ireland.
Okay, Northern Ireland. Okay.
Now the one people say that the Ireland was predominantly a Catholic, deep-rooted Catholic, whereas the British were Protestant.
Protestants, yes.
And that played a crucial role. But that was the secondary. The primary was, of course, they were not. They felt that they were not getting their dues.
Correct.
Abhay, I can add a point, because I was in Hyderabad for 8.5 years.
Okay.
And I can see the kind of anger among Telangana people towards Andhra people. Okay. And this is because of the marginalization, economic, social, political, and all aspect of marginalization. Because the Andhra people are dominant, and Telangana peoples they're very marginal.
And the Andhra people would be certain castes.
Yes, there are ready and comma both sides. If you see today also in Telangana, the chief minister is ready, and the earlier one was Rao. Same Rao ready combination is there in Andhra also. But regional marginalization within the region, there are coastal people who are very powerful and very rich, and they dominate in terms of everything in Hyderabad and surrounding people, and politically they marginalize. Though Telangana produced the prime minister like Narasimha Rao and many stalwart, but the region was not, at par with Andhra. So that was one kind of victim, they played that mobilized the political, anger towards that. Then it took almost 30 years to, get separate. But this movement is very old.
So
And this,
Manish, you see, there are multiple identities at play, and the identities keep on shifting based on multiple factors. And again, as I said, in sociological terms or in people terms, there are never deterministic factors. There are multiple factors at play. When one does enough research and scholarly pursuit, then you find there are some major factors, there are some minor factors, and there are some X factors which come, which speed up a process. Manish.
Yes, sir, I understand. And
Okay.
another view given by Sahu sir was also important.
Absolutely.
The region means region divided into coastal and interior. Generally, in any country, the coastal region will be prosperous than the hinterland, right?
Okay.
That
Okay.
is generally acceptable, be it UAE or any part of the world, right? Be it China. So
Okay.
that the three things I see, that the regional, that means coastal and non-coastal, and of course it will at the end of the day, if there is a caste or regional divide, then that will be used.
Okay.
For example, just I'm giving a situation in which suppose the Telangana and Andhra. Now suppose when the economic division is there, and in one part one religion is there, other part other religion, then that will take the religious turn, right? This is natural
Manish may
course.
not. Manish may not. See, again, it depends on
No,
how.
historically it happens. If
how
division is like, say, take the case of the Sudan. Why the
okay.
Sudan was divided? The main reason was the South Sudan was economically not getting resources, right? And then the religion thing followed, and because of that.
Manish, the religion becomes a way, religion like caste or other factors becomes a way of mobilization in
Yes,
terms
yes.
of politics.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Absolutely.
saying. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's move ahead. So there are all these questions in terms of questions of identity, national identity, relationship between state and identity. This is explained a little bit more into the in the SLM, the self-learning module, though I have not picked it up. You can just read it. They are topics in themselves, so I did not want to dwell too much on it. I wanted to come straight away to diaspora. Now, diaspora itself, the whole concept of diaspora itself is changing. So diaspora in three meanings, this is something that I'm reiterating, which I've done it earlier, but I'm going because there are a lot of new people who have joined as a social form, concerns social relationships, common origin, migration routes. Somebody saying something? Is somebody saying something? Okay. As a social form, tension between loyalties to homeland and hostland groups. Some groups can mobilize collective resources. We had talked about these carpenters, the Ramgadiyas, who mobilized in terms of Africa, and then they went against the Hindu council and had their own temples. Ramgadiyas were from a lower caste. They were able to mobilize. They were able to acquire financial heft and mobilize. Consciousness reinforced by. Then there is a type of consciousness. It's a recent perspective. Consciousness reinforced. And today, cyberspace, internet, messaging apps reinforces consciousness. We continuously keep getting to know who we are. And the third is mode of cultural production. Focus around issues of globalization, identities of diasporic communities are fluid with description of syncretic, crossover, and hybrid. Multiple culture helped by global media and communication provide people are moving, they take something, they leave something back, and particularly the young are picking up. Why do you think, for example, Halloween is so popular among the metropolitan children in India? Because a culture has been picked up which seemed cool to this Western educated people moving back and forth, and that's how it is. And then Valentine's Day, again a Western construct. But the fact is, this then when this comes in and this kind of a cultural clash happens, then there is obviously tensions in the society. Articulation of diaspora towards late 20th century has enabled the idea of multiple identity, multifaceted cultural phenomena, made palatable within a monocultural environment. Trends are celebrated with description of fusion, hybridity, and so on and so forth. Diaspora spaces are influenced by media and communication has impacted on redefinition of local. And today, say, for example, there's a case study of Z or Sony or all these Indian channels which are now seen because it's available on internet. These channels or these media are now seen by the diaspora, incorporating how they understand this concept based on their syncretic culture or their hybrid culture, their understanding of the old homeland. It to make sense is quite a very complex way. In the first world country, many welfare rights are provided to new immigrants. So such rights ease the requirements of these immigrants to imitate the dominant culture and to maintain their own culture. Diaspora is thus inclined to settle down in such localities where new immigrants are migrated, and how diaspora engages with this host culture, how they manage, negotiate their home culture with this whole culture, and cultures itself are changing. Ease of transportation, communication, fellow immigrants, permit immigrants to maintain diasporic fidelity. So that's what they said. A lot of African traditions which are lost in Africa, Africans are going to places like El Salvador because the Africans who went and settled in El Salvador still practice those pure African culture which is lost in Africa. So, for example, the Indians who went to America in the 60s do not understand the concept of India as it today, because the India as it today has moved in terms of cultures. And they seem to be much more traditional than what Indians in India are. When they adopt the new ways, they also learn new language, new identity, scattered structure of diaspora, distinct influences may generate different perceptions of common identity, blur the lines of authority, different than their own, and they themselves keep on changing in terms of identity, in terms of their culture. Socio-cultural heterogenization, that itself brings in multicultural into host societies. Some retention in this diasporic community is powered by transnational networks, making them a major factor of multiculturalism in host societies, despite social cultural gaps. Two distinct dimensions concretizes social cultural heterogeneity. So inevitably, migration is happening. Migration, people are carrying their cultures. These cultures then interact with host cultures. They change a little, but at the same time, they are interacting with home cultures. They are trying to negotiate between the home cultures and the host cultures, and they bring their own set of cultures, in their diasporic community. So, for example, in 2004, editor of a magazine in UK argued that multiculturalism has failed in Britain. Britain is a classic example. Here was a country which was ruling the world. And here is a country now who's talking about there is too much of diversity in Britain. Has failed experiment or a new or different understanding of culture diversity in the Western world. And the Western people are trying to make sense. What we looked at as normal, they are trying to make sense still. And then, of course, to add to it is transnational media. Diaspora rests on impact of globalization, what the media is presenting. So today, if I was to look at, let's say, the Indian media and the kind of entertainment programs are there, a lot of times I feel, for example, there are no entertainment program for the old or for the young. There is a whole lot of crime entertainment program. What section is coming? And then you are now being programmed from across the world. So today I can see program in terms of Turkish soap operas, or the Brazilian soap operas, or the European soap operas. There's now greater sharing of events as they occur. Interpretation is still dependent upon cultural, national, and ethnic context. So irrespective of the fact that you might see a video which you know is a fake, in the sense it has been doctored, yet you will believe what you want to believe. There's a cognitive bias that you have based on your culture. Play an important role in cultural aspect of diasporic community. Diasporic spaces has shifted the diasporic media from the margins into somewhat celebratory status. Karan Johar and the concept of Indian Bollywood targeted to the diaspora. unintended consequences, the Indian suddenly forgot that they were a developing country, and there was the earlier films, what they portrayed, poverty now was, targeted directly at the diaspora. So there is this research by Robinson X-ray, the idea of banal, what they call as banal transnationalism. What Karan Johar did, ordinary banal realities of Turkish life to migrants living in London, shattering the romantic idea of home. What Karan Johar was doing was a lot of banal realities, in fact, Karan Johar didn't do banal realities. I'm sorry. Karan Johar didn't do banal realities. He did those grandiose realities of Indians to the Indian diaspora, telling the Indian diaspora that things had moved, whereas there was a lot of things which were moving at their own pace. Social media as an agent of.
While making the film,
Yeah.
who is their target customer to begin with, whether the Indian people or the diaspora?
Manish, today, for example, the larger money comes from the diaspora.
No, I think as far as my understanding, it is a fraction of what we get domestically. It may be higher or
possible. But again, whom are you targeting? So, for example, if you notice, a lot of SRK's movie is targeted locally, though, that movie, I'm Not a Terrorist, that movie was targeted at the diaspora kind of thing. They was looking at a larger topic. So again, it depends today, but when a filmmaker is making a movie, he or she is looking at the various segments and how they are bringing components of various cultural components into the movie so that it could be a fit for all segments. Manish?
Yeah, okay. So one way to look at it is that what you are saying, that is okay. One way, if I get into the mind of Karan Johar,
okay,
is to be like, okay, I'm making, normally you rightly said earlier, we were portraying the poverty of India. And normally, like if I'm a filmmaker, I will see that when my audience goes spend 3 hours with the film, when he comes out, he should be very happy. Be it a laborer or whatever, who has so many problems in his life.
Correct.
So one way could be to that, the target is the Indian customer itself.
Possible. Manish, but also
that they feel a glamour and they feel happy and they may even think about getting into that kind of thing.
Correct. Manish, one more thing which has happened. Post-90 liberalization, the average Indian middle class is also a transnational traveler. He and she are moving with corporate jobs and they are traveling the world. And that is one of the reasons Karan Johar movies has locations which are not Indian, but across the world. So you are targeting the diaspora. At the same time, you are targeting the transnational Indian, because today a large section of Indians are working for corporate and are moving all the time. Manish?
Yeah, and if we combine the entire diasporic market, like for example, this Indian, for example, USA, UK, Canada, Malaysia, Singapore, Fiji, another thing, I mean, the number may not, then itself, it can become a big market.
It's a huge market.
I think that I am targeting them only.
It's a huge market. It's a huge market. And again, as I said, today, the migration and the migrant is not just a migrant which goes and settles at a place. The migrant itself is moving. The concept of migration itself has changed. So a whole lot of these young people who are working with multinationals are moving all the time. And this would be the typical target of grandiose sets, foreign locations, multi-starrer, movies. Works very well. But this is the great case study to, actually deconstruct Karan Johar's movies. Manish?
Yes. And just I would like to say that the migrant are culturally very hungry. I'm making a one-liner, they are culturally very hungry. They have the money, they have the success, and now what they want is the culture of their home country, right?
Manish, which is what diaspora is all about, the connection back home.
Yeah. And then selling those kind of thing is very easy.
So Ranjit is talking about SRK films were shown in German TV in 2005-6. Absolutely. So Bollywood becomes a great soft power for India. And that's where when sometimes, there is this, anti-Bollywood kind of political movement. It actually harms the nation much more, in terms of financial and other aspects. But nevertheless, let's talk about this. Let me finish the PPT. So there is this research on ZTV and Indian diaspora. Situates viewers as ethnic in the framework of host country, situates viewers as ethnic minority, context of relationship, the viewers' relationship with the country, in terms of diasporic. So ZTV was one of the first TV networks which was beamed to the Indian diaspora. And this research basically said, is it a site of resistance to the dominant culture? And does it offer spaces of empowerment for diasporic community in the UK? Remember, diasporic communities, whenever you are migrating as a migrant and as a diaspora, you are always, there is a part of you connected back into the homeland. Unless you are the second, third, or fourth generation, which also based on socialization and other issues, how this works out is totally different. But the first generation is also tremendously culturally connected to the homeland, because that's how they get their, they are able to sustain themselves in an alien space. Okay, summing up, multiculturalism is a theoretical framework, multicultural, racial, religious, multilinguals, mode of integration juxtaposed with other modes based on core democratic value of liberty, equality, fraternity. Postmodernist world, multicultural is seen as a medium to represent race and ethnicity, class, gender, and sexuality. Yes. In this globalized world, migration changes cultures continuously. The term has been used in two broad ways. Contextual of rests on impact of globalization and the mobility of migrant communities. Transnational diasporas exemplify distinct dimension, social cultural heterogeneity, and there are some references. There is this multiculturalism in Indian fiction. So Ashok has studied multiculturalism in Indian fiction. Similarly, multiculturalism can be studied in, let's say, movies, especially Karan Johar movie or any other movie, the new filmmakers, how they are treating their subjects, what kind of cultural symbolism are they putting in. Rajiv Bhargav, the multicultural framework, mapping multiculturalism is two references. Okay, let me stop this. Let me put on my screen. Hi, any questions? So it's a very interesting topic in the sense that it tends to bring in a lot of questions, both in terms of how policies should be made, how should the state look at multiple cultures, how does how does political formations deal with this? Is it okay to do mobilization based on culture? Because it has got consequences. So that's where this topic is interesting. It is contentious, and it's a part of the sociological realm, and it needs to be known, especially in today's world where migration is a norm. It's no longer, a luxury. It's a norm. People are moving all the time for jobs, for better life, because of climate change, because of various other things. So that's the way it is. Any questions?
Okay, not a question, but
yes, Manish.
Today I would like to talk about, I don't know whether other people have talked about it, but I feel there is a one thing which is never talked about in the migration diasporic study. I'm using the word inter-diasporic studies.
Okay.
I mean, in one country we study like Indian diaspora is there, which study about them, Chinese diaspora. But what about the study between two diasporas? For example, in USA there is a Chinese diaspora, or say, for example, in I will take a very good example of UAE, in which more than Indians are there in 33%, then the Bangladeshi, Pakistani, and they combine form more than 50%. So inter-diaspora study means what is interconnection between Indian diaspora, Pakistani diaspora, and Bangladeshi things like this. I think has not been studied much in detail.
Manish, research has been done in, for example, in Europe and America. People from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh are not called Asians, they're called South Asians. In fact, India being a predominant, country in South Asia, a lot of Bangladeshis and Pakistanis also go by Indians. They have the Indian curry restaurants. So there are papers which have been written. Uh, there and inevitably, in fact, in a lot of other things also, Ranjit has also done. Swadesh was the gentleman who does a lot of work in terms of Telangana and Middle East. Essentially, South Asians come together majorly. UK, for example, there have been cases where there are, the South Asians come across majorly. There have been studies, Manish. So maybe not to that extent in terms of South Asia, but you're right. The field is so ripe and creative that anything that you pick up is worth, writing a paper and a study. Manish?
Sir,
Yes, Gurpreet.
sir, role of sports and literature for maintaining multicultural harmony. Because few years back, I visited Europe, UK,
Okay.
and during the football match, the posters were distributed where it was written "No racism," the black and white players.
Okay.
So how sports can play the roles, how literature can play the role.
Yes, absolutely. I haven't come across any papers on this study, but yes, I've been hearing a lot of talk about how sports is, and in fact, there was this major case of racism in sports in Europe as well as in India, where
Sure.
slurs were put onto certain players. I haven't seen a study on that, but if you search a little, maybe you, Gurpreet, if you search a little, maybe in the next class, you can tell me if you came across any. Let me also find out if there is any paper on sports and multiculturalism. I am not
Right, sir.
sure, but you are right. Sports plays a major part in terms of integrating society.
Absolutely true, sir. Sir, even I think literature is playing dormant role. The good books, the books prize winner books, Booker Prize winners, Nobel Prize literature.
Literature does play an important part. There is a lot of literature being written. In fact, we are not giving enough emphasis on literature. There is not enough study which is being done on See, media becomes a very important player into the whole process. So, for example, there has been studies. For example, one of the references that I put out was multiculturalism in English fiction. So people are doing it, but obviously things are changing very fast, and there are multiple fields. So more people are required to do scholarly work. So possibly people are doing. See, there is always scope. That's the beauty of academics and scholarly pursuits. Gurpreet?
Highly thankful, sir. Thankful.
Okay. Any other question? Okay. So in case there is no other question, then we meet next Saturday. We are picking up another topic in terms of sociology, which is family kinship, which, see, all these things give a great idea in terms of how people understand society, how they work with identities. And then when the same people move in terms of individuals or as groups, and they, there is formulations of this diaspora. It's not just people move and then come together and become diaspora. There has to be mobilization for something. So that mobilization could be for insecurity. So there are a lot of people, let's say, who are in a foreign land, feel insecure, and then they formulate a particular religious places are a great place for for mobilization, where a sense of security, because we are from the same religion, but religion is not enough. So, for example, you might be a particular religious community, but there could be other immigrants. Then you need somebody from your culture. So these places become great place at mobilization. Then there could be some other discrimination which leads to mobilization. Then, of course, remember diasporic formations happen in multi. So people move, let's say today, after 10 years, what people move, they might be from a different region, they might have a different identity, they might have a different culture. Those mobilizations are different. So these sociological things help a lot. So we're going to next Saturday, 3 o'clock, we'll meet and talk about family and kinship. You have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful week ahead. Have a nice time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.